Am I going to read my wish and then we'll start
Ah,
from where we left off?
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. My wish. The lover has to keep the wish of the beloved. My wish for my lovers is as follows. Do not shirk your responsibilities. Attend faithfully to your worldly duties, but keep always at the back of your mind that all this is Baba's. When you feel happy, think Baba wants me to be happy. When you suffer, think Baba wants me to suffer. Be resigned to every situation and think honestly and sincerely. Baba has placed me in this situation. With the understanding that Baba is in everyone, try to help and serve others. I say with my divine authority to each and all that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. So do not forget to remember me in your last moments. Unless you start remembering me from now on, it will be difficult to remember me when your end approaches. You should start practicing from now on. Even if you take my name only once every day, you will not forget to remember me in your dying moments. Avtar Meher
Avatar
Baba ki
Meher
jai.
Baba ki Jai. Thank you. So, where are we? We are at the series one of the book. We are in page 10. We stopped on the 21st of August, and then we had issues with getting the book. And here we are back again with the next uh, 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 next edition, where we will continue reading from the Om point. Before that, just as context, so here there is a focus on the mind and the focus on infinite intelligence. Actually, let's just read the subtitles, which is a good idea.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, just to uh, set the context back, let's just read the subtitles of the first series. That will give you an idea of what we did. The title is Omnipresence of Infinite Intelligence. We understood infinite intelligence is in every infinite false self being the small ones that you see here at the bottom. Uh, we saw the evolving of thinking. So thinking starts from the atom state in its very small, I mean, in a very infinitesimally small way, and then goes on to the human mind where its capacity is at max. Drops and oceans, the contrast was made. The mind, its sanskaras, and the receiving and the dropping of its bodies. We saw infinite intelligence is in every individual false mind. That is, the false mind exists till the time you go to realization. Thinking and imagination was contrasted, which was first time. We have not seen that earlier. The bodies as covers, false and real mind. False thinking results from sanskaras. False and real I as drops. Both are drops. And yeah, so he uses the example, and Sunil smartly used all our names in that example, if you recollect. And
Yeah.
then you have false and real consciousness, and infinite intelligence contains and resides in everything, right? And we stopped at the point where each individualized infinite intelligence contains everything. So, again, individualized is probably not used by anybody other than Baba, which is a very beautiful way. We saw it first in discourses, and of course, we see it many times in God Speaks. The word carries a lot of potency, right? So it's not just about individual, but individualized. So there is a action that has converted it to individual, and that is the whim, and that entity or that form continues to have separative existence. Again, his word, right? And it sustains till you go to the point of God realization. And we believe beyond that as well, right? So
Yeah.
there you will have the recognition and realization of your true nature, but that does not lead to what we commonly perceive, especially those from the Hindu and Vedantic forms, that you merge into something. So instead of that, that separative identity continues. So there's a lot of depth to the use of the word individualization. So with that, let's get started where we stopped. We stopped here. So any thoughts before I continue?
This individualized soul maintaining its separateness. Vishishtadvaita has a idea that those who get out of this cycle reach God and stay with God. They are also
Okay.
individualized souls. So that idea is there, as I feel. These souls which have got realized, they remain in Vaikuntha in association with God. They are not totally merged with God. So
Correct. You
that
can
idea
never
is there.
attain godhood. At least that's the idea of Vishishta Advaita. You can get very close, but you can't really attain, right?
Huh.
So in that sense, I'm not very aware of what it is, but that's very interesting. So that's not an idea that's alien even to Hindu philosophy and thought. So though a minority, which is like you pointed out, Vishishta Advaita, which is
And
uh,
Dvaita says that we are always
no way,
dashas.
yeah, that's it.
No
Yeah,
way we
you're
can.
always correct. Correct. Okay, so that's good input. So who's the Vishishta Advaita is represented by who? Who's the thought leader, the
Ramanuja.
spiritual Ramanuja, and that's it, right?
Yes.
Is anybody else under Ramanuja? After Ramanuja?
After Ramanuja, I don't. There are a lot of. It starts with all the Alvars, and then
Okay,
who
Ramanuja.
philosophically crystallized the whole idea is Ramanujacharya.
Correct. All right. South. Thank you. So, any other thoughts? And anybody wants to read?
Not today. Okay.
Okay, no problem. So, we'll get started then. We start from the Om point. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. The Om point. The subtle and gross universe, the whole creation, comes out of infinite thinking because the creation means the infinite imagination of infinite thinking. The producing point of this infinite thinking is known as Ahur Bindu, the Om point, the Maheshwar point from which everything, the whole subtle and gross creation, has issued forth. The atom of infinite thinking, when unvibrating or unconscious or inert, contains within itself the fine or latent universe, which is nothing but imagination. But when it vibrates, becomes conscious, the subtle and gross form of this universe or imagination is produced or manifested, in other words, created. There's an asterisk on fine. Let's just check it out. The word fine, one of the key terms in this text, means latent and unmanifested in the unconscious state. It designates the last degree of finitude or the 0 point of manifestation, which is equivalent to latency. When the universe is projected out of its fine state, it becomes first the subtle and then the gross universe. The fine universe should not be confused with the mental sphere as described in God Speaks. For further discussion, see essay, pages 464 to 68. Now, another input that I got from multiple people is that this book is pretty divergent from what we have come to understand and appreciate in God Speaks, right? So, as a advice, I mean, you'll have to keep that in the back of your mind when you're reading this book. And please remember the chronology. The chronology is this was done in the 20s, and God Speaks was done in the 40s and 50s, 40s and finalized in the 50s, right? So please keep that chronology always in mind, and don't, I mean, hold your thoughts, and let's keep the discussions going. Very happy to discuss and spark more and more discussion around this, but I don't want to create confusions. Second, I think we should read this essay after series one, which is basically the editor's notes on how they see the contrast between these two books. So we'll read that and then get to series two. Okay. All right. The distinction. Yeah. Let's go back to para one, para two. Infinite thinking, thinking falsely and really. Infinite thinking is one and eternal. When done finitely, it is finite. And when done infinitely, it is infinite. When done falsely, it is false. When done really, it is real. And when not done at all, it is no thinking. When falsely thinking, as the infinitely falsely thinking infinite intelligence, or the infinite false I, infinite thinking realizes or thinks the universe, imagination. When really thinking as the infinitely really thinking infinite intelligence, which is the infinite real mind or infinite real I, infinite thinking realizes or thinks itself. The last line is confusing. So let me read the last two lines again. When falsely thinking as the infinitely falsely thinking infinite intelligence, which means all of this is about the infinite false I. It's very simple actually. Infinitely falsely thinking. That is the individualized soul. But that individualized soul also is infinite intelligence. So infinitely falsely thinking infinite intelligence, or the infinite false I, infinite intelligence realizes or thinks the universe. So it dreams up the universe, which is imagination. But it's false. Then, when really thinking as the infinitely really thinking infinite intelligence, which is the infinite real mind or infinite real I, infinite thinking realizes or thinks itself. So, this is a repetition of the concept that we heard earlier, which is infinite thinking or real thinking of infinite intelligence is the process of realization, right? So, this is the theme, obviously, which is unique to this book, given the title and what Baba is talking about. So, we'll continue. Thus, the universe, which is subtle and gross imagination, comes out of or is created by the infinite thinking, which means consciousness. In other words, infinite thinking is the creator of the whole universe through its atom point. Yeah. Next subtitle, thinking. Thinking falsely, thinking really, and not thinking. This is also referred in the two paras above. When infinite intelligence starts to think, it creates, that is, produces and manifests the universe, which before this had existed as fine imagination in subtle and gross form. Okay, I stop here. So I'm struggling with the word that which before this had existed as fine imagination. Is that what it was? So when infinite intelligence starts to think, it creates, that it produces and manifests the universe, which before this had existed as fine imagination in subtle and gross form. And I presume the which that's referred here is the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's already existing in fine imagination in subtle and gross form, and it just gets manifested. Okay, let me continue. When infinite intelligence thinks falsely, it realizes its subtle and gross imagination, which its thinking had manifested. There is a symbol. So let's go here. The distinction between creating and realizing is fundamental in this text. For further details, see glossary as well as essay. So we will read the essay after this anyway. Okay. So 3 words: creating, imagining, and thinking. I think let's get those sorted after the essay. Otherwise, we'll discuss and get to whatever depth we need to, because I'm assuming key concepts in this book. This realization of the imagination or universe constitutes the conscious state. When infinite intelligence thinks really, it realizes or thinks itself. This is the superconscious state, and when infinite intelligence does not think, it produces nothing and realizes nothing, not even itself. This is its unconscious state.
Oh,
Same.
there is
Go ahead.
that first time the word realizes, even in the false thinking, uh, is used here. So we'll have to be clear about that. Yes. And
So
it's
I think
also
the
highlighted.
realizes here, yeah, the realizes here, I think is more on the dictionary meaning of it and not the
Yes,
spiritual
yes, yes.
philosophical meaning of it, is my reading, but I may be wrong. So
Yes,
when infinite intelligence thinks falsely, it realizes its subtle and gross imagination, in which it already exists. In the subtle and gross imagination, the universe exists. We realize that, as in bring it to reality. I think it's
bring
that
it to
meaning here.
reality. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other
So,
point is when it really thinks, it
mhm,
thinks of itself. That is
exactly.
stressed twice here.
Yeah. Even in the earlier paragraph. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that's the true realization, which is not about creation to reality, but to
Yes.
realize our true nature. Sure. So let's
Okay.
continue. Creation, universe, realization, and self realization. So, strictly speaking, the universe is produced by infinite thinking or consciousness and not by infinite intelligence directly. The universe or infinite imagination is ignorance. The universe itself is not false thinking, rather, it is the production of thinking realized as real through false thinking. In brief, then, the infinite intelligence produces the universe through its infinite thinking, realizes the universe through its false thinking, and realizes itself through its real thinking. So I think our understanding was correct. And I
Mhm.
think this line summarizes it. Um, in brief, then the infinite intelligence produces the universe through its infinite thinking. The use of the word produces is better than the word highlighted reference to the word of realizes, because this is more clear, right? So
Yes,
you're moving
yes.
it to gross form. In brief, then the infinite intelligence produces the universe through its infinite thinking, realizes the universe through its false thinking, and realizes itself through its real thinking. Okay?
Okay.
Solely because of false thinking, infinite intelligence realizes the originally and really most finite imagination or universe as infinite and its infinite self as finite. Ultimately, because of real thinking, infinite intelligence realizes the originally most finite imagination, universe, as indeed most finite, and its real infinite self as infinite. Right? Okay. So that's where we are. We finished series 1. Any thoughts, comments before we continue?
Here, one point which is not so clear is that its real infinite self as infinite. So here, what is meant by self as such? That is not so very clear in the whole passage. What do you mean by self?
Anybody wants to respond to that? I lost a few seconds because I closed Teams by mistake. I didn't hear the whole question. So anybody else wants to respond to what
in the
Mama asked?
whole passage here, its real infinite self as infinite. So the infinite intelligence realizes the originally most finite imagination universe as indeed most finite, and its real infinite self as infinite. So here, what is that self?
That is the ego personality self, the false I self. So remember, there is always, the real I self and the false I self. The real I self is the infinite consciousness. And the infinite unconsciousness, which is state 2A, that has basically, is giving that illusion, right, about the false self. And even the false self is infinite. So that is how I interpret it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, so am I sharing my screen? I'm not, sorry. As I said, it just, I killed my, okay. So let's go to this and go to page 464, right? Let's read the essay. '69. Cosmic essay on the philosophy, text, and editorial practice. That's the essay we want. I think it might be well worth our time to read this first and come to an agreement on it and internalize it and then continue, because otherwise we'll just be even more confused. Right? So let's start with that. Essay on the philosophy, text, and editorial practice. This book engages a subject of perennial interest to the human mind. For infinite intelligence, the divine intelligence, that spontaneous predisposition and capacity to know inherent within being itself, the knowledge that is the nature of God, has intrigued philosophers and seekers since ancient times. But when Meher Baba speaks on these subjects, his words originate not from the cogitations of the limited mind, but from the gnosis of true realization. Thus, the profundity and originality of this work, and many of its difficulties as well, have their source in a perspective that, until the time of this avataric advent, has rarely, if ever, found expression in the English language. The exposition on infinite intelligence in this book takes the form of an extended treatise, or more probably, two treatises: a longer one, Infinite Intelligence as All in All, and a shorter one, Sadguru and the Light of Intelligence. Collectively, these two works comprise the book Infinite Intelligence. While evidence on authorship consists almost exclusively of what can be gathered from the manuscript itself, one can assert with conviction that the major content must have been given forth in one way or another by Meher Baba in mid-1920s. Thus, the book offers insight not only into matters of the deepest metaphysical import, but also into the manner in which the avatar of the age chose to expound on these topics in the early years of his advent, decades before the more systematic formulations of his explanation on the nature of the universe and reality presented in Discourses and God Speaks. Infinite Intelligence clearly occupies a unique place in the body of writings attributable to Meher Baba. Yet, it brings with it serious complexities and difficulties as well. How did this text come into being? Who wrote it out in its present form? Did Meher Baba himself handwrite or dictate a previous draft of it word for word? Or did someone among his mandali compose it from points that he gave? For that matter, on what grounds do we impute authorship to Meher Baba at all? And what is one to make of its philosophic esoteric content, much of which will seem new and strange to readers versed in Meher Baba's later writings? How do we situate and understand these new texts within the larger body of explanations, discourses, and messages that Meher Baba gave? And what has the role of the editors been in determining the final form of this present book? Why, indeed, does material that, as we presume, originated with Meher Baba need to be edited in the first place? I'll read that again. Why, indeed, does material that, as we presume, originated with Meher Baba need to be edited in the first place? So, lot of questions. I think there are 10 questions in the last para. All the questions make me more intrigued about the book, and also kind of second the reactions that I've got from some senior Baba lovers about this. So let's keep going. The editors,
but very honest.
Yes, very straightforward and honest. Yes. The editors recognize that many readers will not want to bother themselves with questions of this kind, but would prefer to plunge directly into the book's main exposition. For that reason, this essay has not been placed in the front matter of the book, where it might distract from and impede the book's main business, but rather it has been reserved to the back as a resource for readers to use as they choose. The editors do feel, nonetheless, that most readers would find the book more approachable and easily intelligible if they would at least peruse the first section that follows philosophic content before embarking upon their reading of the book's primary text, or perhaps concurrently with that reading. But beyond offering aids for readers as they grapple with the book's philosophic content, the editors are conscious of a further obligation to provide full information on the text and manuscript, particularly information relevant to the authoritativeness of this manuscript as a record of Meher Baba's own words. And further, the editors want to be as transparent as possible regarding the types of changes and revisions which they have introduced. For, as the avatar of the age, Meher Baba's slightest word and action is fraught with deep significance, and as such will be plumbed and scrutinized in the ages to come. To what extent can one rely upon this present book as an accurate register of what Meher Baba himself has said? So far as possible, the editors would like to make available whatever evidence on this point they themselves have had to work with, so that readers who want to can judge for themselves. The remainder of this essay then addresses three topics. The remainder of this essay then addresses these three topics: the philosophy, the text, and the editorial practice. The exposition of philosophy will explicate some of the major themes of the book and will offer perspectives on how, across differences of language and philosophic vocabulary, one can relate its major propositions to those Meher Baba has expounded in God Speaks and other major writings. In the next section, the discussion of text will comment on the two notebook volumes of the original manuscript, the Intelligence Notebooks, in which the text is found, and on the master chart reproduced on facsimile on page 500. On the nature of the contents of that manuscript, on the text's literary and biographical context, on issues relating to the literary status of the text, and on evidence of authorship. The third and concluding section of this essay on editorial practice will outline the scope and nature of the editorial revision. In its raw form, the text would be largely impenetrable to a general public. To make it accessible to more than just textual scholars, the editors have edited far more extensively than has been done previously in the standard body of Meher Baba's writings. The apparatus of this book, with its endnotes, glossary, appendices, etc., the editors have created in part to make the nature of this editorial process and the character of the original manuscript visible to those readers who wish to pursue the matter. Ultimately, of course, there is no substitute for a return to the original manuscript, which in future years will no doubt inspire new editions that improve upon this one. The editors hope that the manuscript will in due course be made more widely accessible in some format to those interested in it through facsimile print publication, digital reduplication in the compact disc or internet mediums, and in other ways. Because of its direct relationship to Meher Baba's own act of literary composition, the manuscript will always remain the primary text and authority, while editions that present it to the public will stand as secondary texts and derivatives. Okay, so that sets the context for the three parts of this essay. And I think that should be in the front of the book rather than the back of the book, but that's my personal opinion. So let's get started with the first, philosophic content, infinite intelligence as a philosophic enterprise. The two treatises in this volume can fairly be described as expositions in metaphysics. More specifically, they are concerned primarily with what philosophers call problems in ontology, the science of being and essence, and soteriology, the study of salvation and redemption. That's how tough the study of salvation and redemption is, right? I struggled with the word. In other words, the intelligence notebooks answer the questions: what is, and how is the individual to gain release from the domain of the apparent and phenomenal into the domain of the real? They do not address themselves to the practical aspects of the spiritual life in the way that Meher Baba's discourses does, nor do they provide poetic illuminations on matters of love for God, such as in everything and the nothing. So this is more on the problems of ontology. So I don't know why the word ontology is used here. More specifically, I'm concerned primarily with what philosophers call problems in ontology, the science of being and essence. Okay, I did not know that is what ontology stood for. Interesting. Yeah. A pause. Any comments? Any reactions? None.
The word
Go ahead.
being and existence is actually mentioned in God is infinite love. If you look at that chapter in Discourses, this whole process of creation, going from infinite unconsciousness to unite with infinite consciousness through the dissolution of sanskaras, is to gain that state of, I call it B triple E, like B, which is being, expression, existence, and there is another E for it. I'll try to remember. So it is all about the expression of infinite consciousness to go through this whole process of being veiled about its own self. You know, one thing has always bothered me is why did this whole creation come about? You know, we understand the word who am I, but the interesting thing is God already knows who he is, because right at the most original whim, he separates into two parts, right? Infinite consciousness, which is the eternal avataric infinite consciousness, state 2B, and then infinite unconsciousness, which is the opposite of that. And this particular infinite unconsciousness is going through the whole process of evolution, reincarnation, involution, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, to realize that it was already there, but it had not realized. So it's actually creating its own veil. So that is what is interesting to me, you know. And so this being, expression, existence is another way of looking at why we are going through this whole process of infinite intelligence. Hey, Baba.
The question that you posed is something that I think we will never get an answer to. It's a disconcerting element. It's something that is a question of wonder, right? Why, right? So who am I is fine. Uh, um, why this journey to get to the realization is, I think, something that will remain in the realm of mystery, right? So I think, but a good question
Till you reach the seventh
nonetheless.
plane.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So it will reach it. It will only be by experience that you unravel that mystery. Personal
Or
experience,
maybe
not
the insight that I just got was, remember that in this whole process of evolution, reincarnation, and involution, not every soul is going to reach that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That is the Satchitananda state, infinite power, knowledge, and bliss. Because after the first stage of Fana, which is Nirvana, which is basically bliss, and even in Moksha, you have only bliss, ordinary Mukti. Both Nirvana and Moksha are almost the same, except one is before death, one is after death. So the whole funda is to reach the state of bliss, which is what we experience unconsciously in our sound sleep state, and which Baba talks about the absolute divine vacuum state of the Paratpar Parabrahma, which is unconscious of it. So technically, I think that we don't mind just having bliss, because that is what we experience after sound sleep state. That's my understanding. Jai Baba.
interesting. As I said, mysterious, and it'll continue to be interesting, and we might get many more insights amongst all of us on what it could be, but no straight answers, right? So let's continue. Within the body of Meher Baba's writings, the content of the intelligence notebooks most resembles God Speaks. Fundamental topics such as the nature of God and illusion, creation and God realization, evolution, reincarnation, the path to God, sanskaras, the different states and aspects of God, and the types of aspirants and realized ones are common both to these earlier discussions and to Meher Baba's magnum opus from the 1950s. At the same time, God Speaks, the product of a later stage in Meher Baba's work, is a very different kind of book. Meher Baba dictated it with its publication in book form, specifically in Prospect, and under his direction, it was edited and prepared for public presentation. Moreover, it presents a certain theme and body of ideas systematically and comprehensively. As a single statement of Meher Baba's metaphysics, God Speaks continues to occupy the central position in the body of his writings, and it constitutes a most essential background to the reading of Infinite Intelligence. So it's relegated to background reading to Infinite Intelligence, which is good, given that we have done it. But it's also intriguing to see how it'll be different. The intelligence notebooks, for their part, convey powerful and original content, but as they stand, they do not at all constitute a polished and refined record of an author's intentions. Their textual material may or may not have been intended as a book. We have no sure way of knowing. And certainly, the raw manuscript form is not ready for publication. The theme and subject it discusses are harder to define than those of God Speaks, and the treatment that it provides is less easily reduced to a single coherent argument. Yet, in its own idiosyncratic way, it does develop certain core ideas. And in the course of doing so, it provides extraordinary vistas on realities that lie at the very fringes of intellectual comprehensibility. It seems to take as its natural terrain the immediate ground of contact between the real and the illusory. Through various conceptions and figures of thoughts, it keeps describing how the is not arises out of the is, and the is out of the is not. The ideas that it expresses are not ideas in the usual sense because one constantly intuits within and behind them a reality and a presence beyond the realm of ideas together. Thus, learning how to read this material does not come easily. But when one cultivates the taste for it, it proves to be very intoxicating and reveals a power to trigger sudden glimpses into domains of experience where thought dissolves into inconceivability and the world mirrors the eye of God from which it arose. So, if the intent is to simplify, it has not succeeded till now. the text is pretty complicated, even in the essay. But basically, they're talking about the philosophical exposition of, I mean, the contrast between reality and illusion, right? That's the way I see it. In the course of mining this book for its inner treasures, however, readers will run up against much that is puzzling and even disconcerting. In fact, this sense of unfamiliarity arises largely because of differences in terminology between these early treatises and Meher Baba's later works. Again, one should remember that Meher Baba was not a philosopher working within the context of an intellectual and philosophical tradition. He was a spiritual mentor awakening humanity to consciousness of God. The language that he used, therefore, was the language that was around him. The words of his metaphysical vocabulary he invested with his own meanings, and over the years, certain terms came to acquire a denotative precision that did not have in his earlier discourses. Some of the apparent contradictions and disjunctures that one finds between infinite intelligence and God speaks then prove to be, on close analysis, nothing more than changes that had taken place in the usage and meaning of certain key words between the mid 1920s on the one hand and the late 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s on the other. So that's very reassuring. So he says many of these, if you go and dissect and actually go deeper, you realize that it's just semantics. It's semantics and how people have come to relate with the terms. So the terms could be sanskaras, the terms could be bliss, the terms could be what is illusion, maya, whatever the terms that Baba uses in this book and in God Speaks Later. The way they are understood and interpreted is the key. So let's keep that in mind. He continues, prime example of this phenomenon involves the word subtle, which in infinite intelligence encompasses the entire domain of the subtle and the mental, as God speaks construes these terms. We already saw that in series 1. In series 1, in the footnotes, we already saw that read subtle as to include both subtle and mental, because at that time subtle and mental was referred to by Baba as all-encompassing. The word thinking, in other words, the subtle world in infinite intelligence covers the first 6 spiritual planes. The word thinking in infinite intelligence designates any activity of consciousness, whether in the domain of thought, feeling, desire, or volition. In God Speaks and other later writings, by contrast, thinking takes on a much more limited sense as an activity of thought as opposed to feeling, etc. Another example is infinite mind, an expression that in the present text carries several distinct meanings. One of these is the mind of the ordinary limited human. One might expect the possessor of an infinite mind to have infinite consciousness or the consciousness of God. But in infinite intelligence, Meher Baba conveys that the ordinary human being has a mind that is fully developed and unlimited, hence infinite, in its potentialities, even if these potentialities are not yet realized. So it's a latent infinite mind, right? So or infinite in capacity, but not in practice, right? It's infinite in potentiality, right? And not yet realized. Another misleading term is Sadguru, which in discourses and God Speaks designates a perfect master, a God-realized individual who had returned from God consciousness to creation consciousness in order to fulfill a certain duty to the world. There are always 5 of these Sadgurus on earth in human form. In infinite intelligence, by contrast, the word Sadguru sometimes carries this later and more particularized meaning. But sometimes it designates a Majzub, a God-realized person who is unconscious of the world. So Sadguru is equated to Majzub, which is pretty unusual because the Majzub doesn't deal with the world and the Sadguru deals with the world, right? So let's keep that in mind, that it's going to happen many times in this book. In these and many other cases, philosophical terms in infinite intelligence enjoy a generality and flexibility of meaning that they do not have in Meher Baba's later writings. Readers alive to this will find that when divergent uses of terms are taken into account, most of the apparent contradictions and inconsistencies between infinite intelligence and God Speaks vanish. Very good. Footnotes in the text frequently draw attention to terminological issues, and most significant terms are defined and explained in the glossary. A second confusing or misleading characteristic of infinite intelligence, in addition to problem of terminologies, concerns expressions of equivalence or identity. The original text is saturated with verbs of being or identity, commas or brackets indicating grammatical apposition or equal signs. One could represent the logical structure of some of these assertions as A equal to B equal to C equal to D. But in many of these cases, what is explicitly characterized as a relation of identity or equivalence is actually an association of some other type. A, for example, may be a constituent member of set B, or else A is caused by B, or perhaps A implies B, or then again, A connects with B in some relevant context. In most cases, the particular sense that Baba intends is apparent if one reads closely. Yet, if one construes these expressions of identity too slavishly or literally, one can easily be misled. The editors have tried to resolve and clarify many of these textual ambiguities and complexities. These revisions will make the meaning more readily perceptible to a general readership. Those students who wish to ascertain for themselves what the original manuscript means will need to return to the unedited text. There's an example. So let's see the example. So there's an equal to here, false mind equal to MU. False mind, MU equal to GV, false, and some Gujarati here, that is feeling of the universe. Yeah. So detail from notebook notebook 1, folio 20, showing equivalencies. So are there subtitles I'm missing? Luckily, no. Okay. So let's continue. At this juncture, however, 2 points need special mention. First, some of these statements of equivalence may result from Meher Baba's style of dictation. In his effort to express ideas quickly, Baba communicating in silence through gestures or writing with chalk on slate slabs may have used equal signs or similar indicators as a shorthand for relationships that were actually more complex, but that, if fully spelled out, would have required laborious and roundabout wordings. The second point is that the nature of the truth that Baba was expressing does not easily reduce to the terms of ordinary philosophical logic. Because God or infinite intelligence is the ultimate reality, everything, in the last analysis, is everything else. The proliferating expressions of identity attest to a perspective in which divisions and separations keep expanding and then collapsing back together like folds in the bellows of an accordion. Since, in truth, these divisions and separations do not really exist at all. So there's a little philosophy in the explanation itself. The remainder of this section introduces some of the major ideas and themes of infinite intelligence, focusing primarily on the treatise Infinite Intelligence is All, in all, but also touching on Sadhguru and the Light of Intelligence, the 2 parts of the book. This essay does not attempt to retrace the actual thread of the argument as it winds through the 14 series of the first treatise and the 44 folios of the second. Nonetheless, it may help the reader steer clear of certain pitfalls and glean the book's main insights more easily. What is intelligence? The philosophy of infinite intelligence is non-dualistic. Its essential message is summarized in Meher Baba's later saying, God alone is real. God, however, rarely appears in infinite intelligence as the key God term. Baba does use various other locutions at various points: the infinite self, the infinite mind, Shiv, Chaitanya, light, Paramatma. The text keeps recurring, however, to the central expression, infinite intelligence. Infinite intelligence is the reality, and all that is infinite intelligence in one state or another. It's equated with God. Is that fair to assume? Here, an obvious question arises. Over the course of his lifetime, Meher Baba, in his references to the intellect, usually drew attention to its shortcomings as an approach to truth. Generally, Baba discouraged the aspirant to turn from intellectualism to love. Rather, generally, Baba encouraged the aspirant. Generally, Baba encouraged the aspirant to turn from intellectualism to love. Why then did he characterize God as intelligence in this text? In discourses and God speaks, the main corresponding terms relating to what could generally be called the cognitive sphere, are consciousness, as in the evolution and involution of consciousness, and knowledge, that is divine knowledge or realization of God, one aspect of the Trinity, truth, knowledge, bliss, or Satchit Anand. The Indian languages have a rich vocabulary in this area, much of it derived from Sanskrit and its tradition of Advaita Vedanta, or else from Buddhism. Buddhi, in particular, seems like a word well suited to a discussion of intelligence. An asterisk. Oh, Bhav Kalachuri's Apar Chaitanya, Meher Nazar books, written on the basis of material that Meher Baba dictated to him, devote sections to such topics as Apara Buddhi, Ananta Buddhi, and Apara Chaitanya, all of them serviceable intelligence terms. So the terms in Sanskrit that can be used for
Buddhi is knowledge, actually.
Correct.
Yeah.
Buddhi,
infinite knowledge.
Ananta Buddhi means infinite knowledge.
Apar and Anant is similar.
Same,
And Apar Chaitanya, infinite consciousness.
Infinite consciousness.
Yes.
Okay. Then again, during the 1960s in Guru Prasad, Baba would from time to time offer comments and brief discourses on Samaj, intelligence or understand. Samaj. Okay, it's Samaj.
Samaj, yeah.
Samaj. Then again, during the 1960s in Guru Prasad, Baba would from time to time offer comments and brief discourses on Samaj, intelligence or understanding. Better word is understanding. Why did Meher Baba not use one of these as the key and pivotal term in this present early treatise? Yet, the fact is that he did not. Moreover, in 1967, Meher Baba returned to the subject of infinite intelligence in material that he dictated to Bhav Kalachuri, material that was eventually published as an extended essay entitled Infinite Intelligence in the book Nothing and the Everything. So we remember the book, we read it. So infinite intelligence occupies pages 153 to 325 in Bhav Kalachuri's Nothing and the Everything, right? Evidently, this word intelligence captures some important and distinctive meaning relevant to the nature of God that Meher Baba wanted to underscore, both in these early discourses and in the explanations that he gave to Bhav 40 years later. Intelligence and intellect are derived from the Latin words inter, between, and legere, to choose between. Etymologically, then, intelligence connotes thinking in its discriminative aspect. In ordinary colloquial parlance, intelligence refers to that faculty of the mind which is the source of mental acuity and rational thought. The word has been brought into service, however, in translating words and ideas from classical and medieval philosophy, not uncongenial with Baba's own use. The Greek word nous in Platonic tradition and the Arabic word aql, in the words of the great Muslim mystical theologians of the Middle Ages, often meant and have been translated as the divine intellect, that primordial consciousness within the being of God that is the ultimate source of all human intellection. Novus and Akal. Some of these
Yeah,
deeper
beautiful.
resonances.
That word
Yeah,
is a new
intellection.
word. Intellection.
Intellection. Yeah, we can look it up, but I think it's just
Yes.
yeah, intelligence or whatever. Yeah. Intellection, the action or process of understanding as opposed to imagination. Don't get confused.
Yes. To basically apply your akala. That is the
Absolutely.
intelligence. You have to apply it and you have to use it for distinction.
That's intellection. That's intellection. Agreed. Okay. So some of these deeper resonances and backgrounds may help prepare the term for the meaning Baba invests it within this present text. Some of these deeper resonances and backgrounds may help prepare the term for the meaning Baba invests it within this present text. Here, intelligence might be defined as that power native to the soul or Atma or reality that naturally and spontaneously knows whatever confronts it, is placed before it. In the sound sleep of the original beyond state, in which no object of knowledge has yet been projected forth, intelligence is confronted with and therefore knows nothing. In the Maya induced falsely thinking state of gross and subtle embodiment, intelligence knows ignorance in the sense that it spontaneously and naturally experiences the ignorance of false thinking. Hence, the expression in series 8, page 131, and elsewhere, knowledge knows what it does not know. That is, knowledge experiences the not knowing or ignorant knowledge as if it were knowledge. When sanskaras vanish and the intervening form disappears, then intelligence sees and knows itself. Intelligence, in short, denotes this native capacity for spontaneous knowledge that knows what it knows directly without any medium or process or activity. Intelligence, in this sense, is proactive and outreaching, a power without limitation. The limitation which intelligence assumes lies not in its own nature as intelligence, but in what it knows in the imaginary object of knowledge, which it gives apparent existence through its act of knowing it. I'll read that line again. It's simple if you get it. The limitation which intelligence assumes lies not in its own nature as intelligence, capital I, but in what it knows, in the imaginary object of knowledge to which it gives apparent existence through its act of knowing it. So it just creates an object of knowledge and gives it apparent existence through its act of knowing. Through its act of knowing it, actually. In that, it can thus take on and lend substance to limitation through its very act of knowing limitation. Intelligence constitutes phenomenality. Phenomenality is our illusory word. It is the stuff of creation and the source of that stuff in reality. It is the very primal and root principle by which being comes into being. Okay, now we go to cosmic architecture. Within creation, intelligence manifests itself as two worlds, the subtle, which is the hidden world, and the gross, which is the visible world. In describing the cosmic architecture of creation this way, infinite intelligence differs from God Speaks and other later writings of Meher Baba's, which refer to three spheres, the gross, subtle, and mental. The subtle world, as he characterizes it in Infinite Intelligence, encompasses the totality of the subtle and mental worlds as defined in God Speaks. In fact, Baba's differentiation of the subtle from the mental was a later refinement with an asterisk. On the dating of this change, see page 527 and 529 in this essay. So further down, we'll actually see where Baba split subtle to subtle and mental. We are in page. Okay. His early use of subtle to denote everything between the gross and God accords with the esoteric literature of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, where subtle meant the inner spiritual worlds generally. There is another relevant background. Gross and subtle, as they occur in infinite intelligence, translate the Islamic terms Jahan e Fani, Jahan e Fani, Jahan e Fani, and Jahan e Baki. The Jahan e Fani designating the perishable gross universe, and the Jahan e Baki referring to the imperishable spiritual world. Islamic tradition conceives the cosmos under a two-world model, whereas the Hinduism posits three. In any event, whether the inner spiritual expanse of the first six planes comprises a single world or two is a question of definition and description. The reality remains unchanged, however one chooses to characterize it. So I have a question here. What is the three worlds Hinduism posits?
I was also thinking on the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm not so clear right now.
So the only place where we get the similarity that I see between GSM and Hinduism is on the koshas, right? Vedanta talks about koshas, but then that's about it, right? So there's no reference to worlds, whereas Baba says there's bodies and corresponding to the bodies, the worlds, right? So I don't see Hinduism having three worlds, at least readily. I'm not able to think of that, but that's something to.
Is it referring to Sthula Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, and Manas and Buddhi, two components of that? I am not clear about that. Try to dwell on that. See.
Anyway, it's
yes, those are the three worlds. Yeah, the three spheres you're talking about, right? The three worlds are three spheres of existence. Yes, the gross, subtle, and mental bodies, and the gross, subtle, and mental spheres.
Yes.
So all these are part of the illusion, and the chakras are also related to that. So the gross, subtle, and mental worlds are the three worlds that I think he's referring to.
While the gross and subtle constitute the worlds or spheres of manifestation within creation, this text does identify a third sphere or universe, which it calls the fine. One might initially suppose that the fine corresponds to what Meher Baba later calls the mental sphere, yet the text does not support this interpretation. So do not assume fine equal to mental, though the word fine is used. The fine is more accurately characterized as creation in latency. When a human being falls asleep, or when creation is swallowed up in Mahapralaya, what happens to the multifarious, subtle, and gross impressions? If they continued to exist in any active sense, sleep or Mahapralaya could not be complete. But if they were not annihilated altogether, one could not wake up and the universe could not regenerate. Baba solves this conundrum by explaining that sanskaras and all that is dependent upon them revert to their fine form or fine state, where they have no active existence or manifestation of any kind, but retain the potentiality to return into subtle or gross manifestation when the light of consciousness falls on them. Interesting. The continuation of these impressions or sanskaras, even in their fine form, apparently exercises a kind of compulsion. When they come back into consciousness, they regenerate the subtle and gross bodies and worlds into active manifestation. While the gross and subtle manifestation of any body of sanskaras is inevitably finite in one way or another, the fine is infinitely finite or infinitesimal. The fine thus ends the line of decreasing finitude. It is the point or atom or drop of darkness within light, as described in the opening section of Series 5. This point or atom stands at the crossing or intersection of the axis of thinking and imagination, the two faculties latent within the infinite intelligence, whose co-arisings are described most fully in the opening section of Series 10. A manifestation, whatever it may be, reverts to the fine when it returns to its original state within the Om point, where it is neither existent nor non-existent, like creation itself when God is asleep. So fine, I hope we are all fine with fine. Fine is basically, so fine is basically where it's the most, let's use that analogy of light and darkness. It's the one step before darkness or at the cusp of darkness, right? So it's the most infinitesimal representation of a sanskara, right?
In my limited understanding, even in Hinduism, the pralaya is taken as not complete extinction of everything. It is once again all the jivas, they will go into a hibernation and come back in the next regeneration. So that is almost similar to what is meant here. So
Absolutely.
even though those who are at the point of pralaya in different stages of their spiritual development or process of evolution or reincarnation or any stage, they will remain there itself. Their sanskaras will be with them, and they will wake up after the next awakening. That is the understanding I get from what I have read from Vedanta, small part of Vedanta. Okay. So that is almost similar to what is referred to here. Huh?
Yeah. No, does Garuda Purana talk about Mahapralaya as well, or just after death?
I'm not sure. I have not read that.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I am reminded of a legal term which could help us understand this or remember this better. It's like suspended animation. So it's you just basically suspend the activity and move it to a state of potentiality. So you're not killing it, but you're not letting it live, right? So you're leaving it in a state of suspended animation. Animation is possible, but currently suspended, and you animate it when you give consciousness to it. That is when God wakes up, right? So suspended animation is another way of doing this. Okay, so continuing. Though infinite intelligence sometimes characterizes the fine as a universe alongside the gross and subtle, it differs from them in that it is a non-manifestation rather than a manifestation, a potentiality rather than an actualization. Meher Baba appears to drop the term fine in his later writings, yet it provides an important clarification on a point that he never specifically addresses elsewhere. These three spheres, the fine, the subtle, and the gross, correlate significantly with the states of a human in the cycle of sleep, dream, and wakefulness. In sound sleep, one reverts to the fine state. In dream, one experiences the subtle universe. And in ordinary wakefulness, one experiences the gross universe. But an ordinary person experiences, so to speak, the fine universe unconsciously, while he experiences the subtle universe subconsciously. The rare one who embarks on the spiritual path, however, passes through the 6 planes of the subtle world, or the Jahan-e-Baqi, in full consciousness. Thus, the pilgrim of the path experiences a divine dream, which this text sometimes designates through the term Turiya Avastha. Okay, Turiya Avastha, our God Speaks expert. Isn't Turiya Avastha in God Speaks the divine junction?
Yes, yes. Turiya Avastha
okay, so
is the one between the Fanafila, which is the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, which is Madzubiyat Fanafila, and the Sulukiyat Bakabila.
yes.
So the Turiya Avastha is where the Paramahamsa state is, the Salik Madzub or the Madzub Salik.
Madzub Salik.
So this is between the first journey, the end of the first journey, and the end of the second journey. The second journey.
Before,
End
yeah.
of the end of the second journey is Bakabila, which is Jivan Mukta state.
Perfect. Okay, but I think here it's the whole of the divine dream, which is nothing but the whole of Jahan-e-Baqi is designated the term Turiya Avastha, so beware. And when retaining this full wakefulness, the pilgrim transcends the subtle sphere, he experiences wakefulness in sound sleep, which is self-realization. This progress from ordinary wakefulness through sound sleep and back to divine wakefulness is discussed many times in Infinite Intelligence and is illustrated in Table 7 on page 338, as well as Figure 25 on page 392, which is based on the figure on Baba's page 29 of In God's Hand. So we'll just go and see the page that was before this. Detail from Intelligence Notebook 2, Folio 13, that reproduces part of a figure from Baba's page 29 in God's Hand. See, right? These 2 figures are the source for the figure 25 on page 392. So here you have the ordinary awake state as 1, ordinary dream state as 2, sound sleep state or unconsciousness as 3, 4 is divine dream. This is the Turiya. Turiya as in this book. Gujarati, that is state. The dream state in the awake state, sub-superconscious state, divine awakening, that is sound sleep state in the awake consciousness, Nirvikalpa. Okay, so after Turiya, you get the Nirvikalpa. And then you have detail in Meher Baba's handwriting from the right-hand column of Baba's page 29 in God's Hand. Baba's left-hand column has another figure not shown here. This diagram shows the movement from ordinary wakefulness to the divine wakefulness of God realization. For further discussion, see notes on the figures, pages 648 to 250. So false ordinary awake state, and then you have the ordinary dream state, and then you have the ordinary sound sleep state. Above that, divine dream state, and there he writes, I think, Turiya in Gujarati. That is the 7 planes and their manifestations. And then the 5th one is divine awakening. That is sound sleep in the awake state. That's the realization. And then he says 5, 4 are real, and 1 and 2 are false. Okay. I'm just dwelling a few more seconds on Baba's written script. Okay, so we'll continue now. So where did I stop?
Yes, there is a heading. You can stop before that.
No. Oh, are we almost out of time? Yeah, no, we have time. So, where did I stop reading and go to the diagram? Is my
No.
question.
Here.
So I have to start from here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. This correlation between the cycle of sleep and awakening and the subdivision of creation into the three universes of the gross, subtle, and fine explains further why in infinite intelligence the six planes of the inner world are described as part of a single sphere. For this entire vast swath between the gross world and the God is the world of dreaming, whether this dreaming is ordinary or divine. In fact, the spiritual path does reach a critical narrowing at the fourth plane. The profound differences between the world of energy that the pilgrim encounters up to the fourth plane and the world of mind that he encounters thereafter are underscored by the terms subtle world and mental world as Baba uses them in God Speaks and other later writings to refer respectively to the first four subtle planes and the fifth and the sixth mental planes. In these later works, Baba describes the inner planes in much greater detail than he does in Infinite Intelligence, thus requiring this further refinement of indicating a subdivision within the inner spiritual world. But in Infinite Intelligence, the accent falls on the commonality of the six inner planes as comprising the world of dream. Current phrases such as follow your dream or dream the impossible dream seem to exhibit some slight contemporary cultural awareness of an association between the world of dreams and higher states of consciousness or inspiration. In summation, when the universe exists in its fine state, the ocean of infinite intelligence abides in unconsciousness, or else in superconsciousness, which is wakefulness in unconsciousness. Please note, there's a contradiction here. Superconsciousness is described as wakefulness in unconsciousness, which is basically infinite and intelligence abiding in unconsciousness. When the universe manifests subtly, infinite intelligence is dreaming subconsciously, or else dreaming in full wakefulness. In the case of the pilgrim on the spiritual path, and when the universe manifests grossly, infinite intelligence is wide awake. I'll read the last line again. When the universe manifests subtly, infinite intelligence is dreaming subconsciously, or else dreaming in full wakefulness. In the case of the pilgrim on the spiritual path, and when the universe manifests grossly, infinite intelligence is wide awake, right? So when you're
Infinite
wide awake,
intelligence is wide awake in the falsity.
gross, in the falsity, yeah. But whereas
Okay.
it's subconscious in the Baki, Jahani Baki, in the spiritual realm, and then in the inert state, it's actually unconscious. Okay, so maybe we'll take a pause. 8:55, structure of individuality. Yeah, we'll take a pause. I don't think we can finish structure of individuality. Oh, the word I picked up this morning. I love this word, individualization and individuality. We'll get to it tomorrow. So, Mamaji, Kama is in Bangalore. Are you already in Bangalore, Kama?
Come on.
He's not talking. But anyway, so keep that in mind. And we will see if we can meet. I will stop recording here and see you all tomorrow. But we'll stay on for a minute